As has been said over these last 2 evenings, there's always a theme that arises from our gatherings together. And the theme that arises for us is time and place. What is the deep meaning of time and place? There was a certain king, and he gathered around him all the learned scholars and pundits in the land to ask them questions. And those questions were, what is the most important time? Where is the most important place? And who is the most important person? There was a great deal of opinion bandied around, but none of these opinions and thoughts resonated with the king. He agreed with none of them. So he was still puzzling over these questions that had arisen for him. Then the king heard of a certain learned sage who lived in the outskirts of his kingdom in a simple hut. So he decided to go and seek the counsel of this sage. So, in the company of a troop of soldiers, he went to see this sage. But when he reached the outskirts of the forest which separated his kingdom from the place where the sage lived, he left his soldiers and went himself with respect to visit the old hermit. When he arrived there, he was greeted and gave the usual salutations. And then he asked the sage, I have these questions. Can you answer them for me? What is the most important time? Where is the most important place? And who is the most important person? Can you answer these questions for me? But at that time, the sage was using his spade to dig a little garden bed. It was now the beginning of springtime, and he had seeds to sow. So the sage said to the king, yes, I can answer your question, but first I must hoe my soil. So the old man went about spading and turning the soil in which he would plant his seeds, while the king leant against a tree. But then the king saw that there was sweat pouring down the old man's face, and he was beginning to pant with the exertion of using the spade. So the king offered to take over. Let me dig a while for you. So the king took the spade from the old sage and began to dig. And of course he began to sweat too with the exertions of digging. And the day passed, but the sage continued his toil. And the king said, well, if you can't answer my question, then I'll just leave. No, no, said the sage, I'll answer your questions for you. And the day wore on until the sun began to set. And the sage said, let us complete our toil now, and we'll go into my hut and have some respite. Aren't you going to answer my question? Said the king. "Oh, yes, yes, yes," said the sage, "I'll answer your question." But just as the spade was being laid down, out of the forest came staggering a man holding a bloody wound in his stomach. So the king and the sage rushed over to the man and guided him to the cabin. The king took off his shirt to stem the flow of blood, and they laid the man down to tend his wound. It was obvious that without care this man would die. So the king, even though he was exhausted from digging the soil, he kept vigil with this man throughout the night, wiping his head, changing the dressings on his wound. But towards the morning, the king was so exhausted he fell asleep, leaning against the door jamb. But when he awoke, the wounded man, was looking at him with tears pouring down his face. And the wounded man was saying to the king, "Oh, forgive me, I'm so sorry, forgive me, forgive me." The king said, "Why do you ask my forgiveness? There's nothing to forgive." But the man said, "I'm an assassin. I heard that you were coming to see this old man, sage, and some time ago your soldiers killed my family and took over my land, and I decided that I would seek revenge and kill you. But your soldiers found me at the outskirts of the forest and inflicted this great wound on me. But you have saved my life. I'm so sorry. I beg your forgiveness. I will be your slave for the rest of my life." The king said, "There's nothing to forgive." And then he said that he would restore the land to this man. The king was wanting to make his departure, but he turned to the sage and he said, "Are you not going to answer my questions?" And the old man said, "But I have already done so." I leave this story unfinished because as you make the translations and discuss the story, there's no doubt, no question that the realization of what the answers were to the king's questions will arise for you. But first, another little story. A messenger came from the Sultan to a very great and learned Sufi sheikh, requesting the presence of the sheikh at the Sultan's palace, because he was expecting a visit from an ambassador from a far-off land. But the sheikh sent back a message with the emissary to say, "I am unable to attend you at this time because the air in that place is not conducive to my health and I cannot bottle it from here." Of course, the Sultan was very angry with the sheikh. But some time later, the great Sufi sheikh appeared at the Sultan's palace just at the moment when an assassin had entered the window and was about to kill the Sultan. And so the sheikh was able to save the Sultan's life. Now the Sultan said to the great Sufi sheikh, "Don't you know that I'm very angry with you? But now I'm indebted to you for my life." And the Sufi sheikh responded, "It is the duty of those who know to be at the right place at the right time and not waiting for ambassadors who are not going to arrive because the visit of the ambassador was cancelled." For you to share.